July 8th, 2024 meeting of the MCI Concord Advisory Board. A couple of things. I think we need to assign a clerk. Unless that happened in my absence, that somebody raised their hand.
We're doing by meeting.
Okay, by meeting. Okay, can I propose on anybody to be clerk for today? I'll be your best friend.
I'm happy to do it.
Thank you. Okay, in the interim, we've Shannon and I think the rest of you guys scheduled the future meetings on their, or at least from now until through August 5th. Here from 12 to 1:30 on alternating Monday. So the next one will be on the 22nd and then the 5th. Do we have minutes for the June 24th?
Yeah.
All right. Actually, yeah. So are there any comments or stuff?
I got a couple comments. One thing, when I was, after Simon's, presentation, I asked him whether the town and he were still open to the sales partnership agreement after we do investigation. It might not make sense, but it might make sense, but is the door still open? And he said, yes, the door's still open. I just want to have it on record.
Okay.
And the other thing was, sorry, Megan, quick moment. I asked Megan, if she could. Megan, I'm sorry. I asked her, I wanted to have in the notes, that I wanted to find out what other town departments have interest in this, property. Like, I think there might have been some interest from, maybe, who knows, might be the.
CMLP or
CMC, exactly.
yes, yeah, you said that, you mentioned.
And I just want to know, we should know that ahead of time before we start planning. Thank you.
Good catches. And just for everyone, in case people are interested, or just to put this out there, I did watch the video. And I made a number of notes, and you guys had a great meeting. I wish I could have been there in person, but I haven't compared it to the actual notes, so I don't have that. That's Peter.
Yeah, in the minutes on page 3, where I mentioned Mass Environmental Policy Act umbrella permit, it says permits. So the concept is one permit for the entire development. So just get rid of this.
Okay. Would that be somewhat analogous to the unified permit system that you?
No, what it is if you're familiar with the MEPA process, projects above a certain size have to quantify their environmental impacts and then do mitigation. So if we can look at the environmental impacts of the entire site and then come up with what the mitigation might be, and then we can phase that in as if we have a developer that does it, they take responsibility for. We have multiple developers, they can take a proportionate share of the mitigation that is derived. But what it does is saves them time. They don't have to go through the MEPA permitting process themselves, which those of us who are familiar with it know that your hair gets white or non-existent during the process. So
Yes, okay, that makes sense. Okay, any other comments on the? No, not seeing any. I would accept a motion for approving with those amendments. So moved. Second. Great. All those in favor? I think we need to do a roll call.
Everything's awesome.
Okay,
Yeah, we should probably also combine that with just a roll call for a change.
okay, sorry. Why don't we do that? Therefore, you did so eloquently alphabetically, and I'm gonna not be able to do it as well, but I'm gonna go around the table and then look. Keith?
I and I.
Okay, Elizabeth,
I,
Linda,
I and I. Oh, I and I, sorry.
Yeah. Lee, okay. Scott?
Yes. I and
Okay, folks on, and we said who's on the,
I.
Aaron?
Hi. Can you hear me? Hello? Yes, I'm here. sorry, I wasn't able to attend the last meeting. And also able to watch.
Excuse me, this is Diane Proctor, and we can't hear anything if we're on a remote feed.
At all?
Now it's coming through. Thank you. That's better. It's been
Thank
very uneven and hard to hear. Thank you so much.
Okay, sorry about that, Diane.
How about now?
I don't,
The microphones aren't connected.
Microphones
This is,
aren't connected.
this is
Okay.
the microphone.
Okay.
Much better. Thank you so much.
Whatever was in the throat of the Zoom call, I guess got worked out. So I think, when the commissioner came and met with you last time, it seems like you guys covered a lot of good ground as far as, some of the basic parameters of, what DCAM is thinking as far as our approach here, what we know about the site. And we understand that you also, since then, were able to book a visit of the ground so you can get on and see them yourself, which is great. What we hope to do today is, I think, go back through a lot of that information in a kind of slower and more deliberate way, really kind of lay out for you what we see as our charge, what we're hoping you'll see is your charge, and then the really kind of vast majority of the work, which is gonna fall somewhere in between. And I think that that's what we want to explore with you today and into the coming weeks and months is, what are the elements of this that rightly sit with DCAM, and what are the elements of this that rightly sit with the town? And who's controlling the data? Shannon, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, please. So yeah, so as I said, we'll kind of give a quick overview of the lay of the land here. Paul will kind of delve into the site itself and what some of the key attributes are of it that we think you'll find of most interest. And then talk about the planning efforts that we're expecting to undertake in the coming months and years, and talk about areas of collaboration. Please feel free to, jump in, ask questions as we go. Next one, please. Okay, so as we all know, given the kind of declining prison populations of over 35 years, but especially since COVID, as part of her budget this year, the governor announced plans to close MCI Concord. So in terms, just a couple of key points on the transition. Actually, we looked this morning at the tracker, and as of July 1st, it looks like the population of the prison was down to 0. Right, Taylor? So DCAM, as the agency that oversees capital planning, design and construction and real estate on behalf of executive branch agencies, we've been tasked with facilitating the redevelopment and the reuse of the site after the closure. DOC, of course, has been charged with unwinding their operations at the site, starting with moving the incarcerated population out. And then there's going to be, extensive turn down operations that they have on site, records management, utility management, mothballing, whatever those considerations are that they're going to be doing well into the coming months. So a couple of key points in terms of what we see as the path forward. So, the first is that in announcing the intended closure here, the governor was clear that she also sees this as an important play for the state in terms of meeting housing goals, helping respond to the housing crisis, and of course, climate change. And just the fact that we will no longer be heating and cooling half-empty buildings is always moving in that direction. We know that thanks to the leadership of Rep. Cataldo and Senator Barrett, that there's been some legislation that gets somewhat specific about the planning process, and I'll go into that a little bit more in a bit, but we're really taking that as our guiding light here. We anticipate that the town will want to put in place some zoning to govern the future of the site, right? I think at your last meeting, you discussed that there is industrial use here. I know that Mary has been talking about, talking with the town lawyer about getting clarity about, what the underlying zoning is, but whatever it is, it seems like it's not, residential, mixed use, whatever the things are that we think might want to happen here. So, I want to keep coming back to the point that it's really up to the town to put in place the zoning, the regulatory framework that will ultimately govern development of this site. And And then the legislation did authorize the DCAM commissioner, who is again charged with all things asset management for the state, with undertaking a competitive disposition process. It did also mention the sales partnership option. That's not what we've been asked to be working on at this point, so I will talk about the competitive disposition process, but with the understanding that that the sales partnership option may still be on the table too.
So, yeah, we'll take a little bit of a look at the site. I don't want to belabor this too much. I know that you will get on site in a couple of weeks, so want to just kind of give an overview of what is there and start to prompt your thinking ahead of that visit. Starting at kind of the 30,000 foot level here, you see the core of the MCI Concord site in the middle there. Called out a couple of key pieces here. In yellow, you see the wastewater treatment plant. Just below that, there's a relatively small existing solar farm that abuts the Concord housing parcel to the south. And you see over on the west side there in red, the Concord reformatory cemetery that exists on site. I know there's existing ongoing work about some potential interpretation and additional information and signage there. If we go to the next slide, zooming in a little bit, the area that's designated for disposition primarily is the 51 acre core parcel that sits there bounded in purple. There's potential for the inclusion of some or all of the parking lot on the west side of Commonwealth Avenue, as well as the white row house, which we'll look at a little bit more closely, that still exists there. Pieces that are not going to be included, the historic cemetery is anticipated to remain with the Department of Corrections, and we don't anticipate disturbing that. And the agricultural lands will also not be impacted by the closure or redevelopment. Zooming a little bit further to the core of the property itself. Maybe a little. I see a hand raised from Patrick.
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick one. The determination of whether the parking lot is included or not, what is how is that determination made?
It's gonna be made above Abby or my pay grade, but it's a conversation between the Department of Corrections and what their remaining needs for that may be, as well as the Commissioner of DCAM. So it'll be a conversation made there. Right now, the white row house adjacent to that is used for administration for DOT. So it will depend in part on where their operations go.
Just say DOT or
DOC, Department of Corrections. Thank you. That's a good question.
I guess, so the two facilities, the one that's being disposed of and the correctional facility, are they currently administered in the same department or division? So, or is that sort of separate administrations within the Department of Correction?
You mean the piece being disposed of and the farm across
Yeah,
the
the
way?
farm that's being kept.
They're both under the control of Department of Corrections, so it's the same group.
So is there likely some kind of shared administration offices or something that's gonna have to be relocated? Like, do you have any?
I don't anticipate that they're gonna have a long-term need for the parking lot, but I'm just not sure that their planning has gotten to that yet. I think that, I mean, you guys would know better than I would, but given what you would have to cross to get from the parking lot
Yeah,
to
it's
the
hard
farm,
to
I'm not
imagine
sure it's.
anybody actually parks there.
Yeah, I don't think you need it for that.
Yeah, I just, a number of us, I think, are thinking that, I think someone said it out loud, Department of Transportation will
Yeah.
have some needs with that, and that may impinge on a portion of the parking lot,
Mhm.
which is, we want to solve the rotary issue, but if we can, develop something portion by the existing house that used to be a duplex and maybe give it some company, that might be nice.
Yeah, we're in conversations with DOT, Department of Transportation. We know that they have ongoing planning and that the impending closure of MCI Concord also fundamentally changes what they might think about for the Rotary. There will, in the future, no longer be a prison on the southeast corner of that current interchange, so I think there's some rethinking to be done there. That was also not, not something that they could plan for previously. So it'll be an ongoing conversation, but it's certainly something that we have in mind as we're thinking about the future and we are having those conversations and intend to, know that that's of substantial interest locally. So I want to make sure that that's a joint conversation around.
Will, on the north side, on the purple line, DOT, are they gonna infringe on that area? I mean, I think in the future, I saw some flyovers and things like that they were planning, which require a lot more width and exit ramps for this area too, so do you imagine we're gonna be squeezed down, that blue line will be brought south because of allowing for more roadways and exit ramps and things like that?
It's a great question. I don't think we know at this point. I think it's too early to say, in their planning process, where lines might go in which direction.
Okay.
I think that,
I think earlier plans took care to not, right, try to penetrate the wall, and so, yeah, but I don't think that they've had the opportunity to give much thought to what happens if that, assumption is removed.
Okay.
Scott, have you seen the previous studies, or has anybody among the board seen the studies that have been done over 20 years?
I saw
This-
this presentation a few months ago.
Okay, and I didn't see that, so I don't know. I mean,
I saw it years ago, but
I understand, yeah, and so,
I saw years ago, a lot of flyovers and things like that.
Remember, we've got DOT coming on our
Yep.
future agenda.
yep.
I think the most recent Route 2 study that came out had some illustrative plans that showed the sort of reworking of the rotary, but they respected all the existing properties that are owned by DOC. So the parking lot was maintained and the MCI parcel was maintained.
So,
any other questions before we continue? We can go to the next slide here and zoom in just a little bit further. You'll get a chance in a couple of weeks to see this on site. Zooming in aggregate, there are 35 buildings on site, a little over 500,000 square feet. You can see the purple buildings within the kind of oddly partially square trapezoidal walls there. There's really 11 major buildings inside behind the walls, which include a combination of administration and operations, inmate dormitories. There's a gymnasium, a chapel, and some vocational workshops inside. That is the interior core. Those buildings inside date to the 60s and 70s for the most part. In a moment, we'll go to the next slide. The historic there's only two remaining 19th century historic buildings on site. Everything else inside is of a mid-20th century vintage or newer. There's some 80s and 90s additions to that. The two historic structures which we have here, there's the grand, what's currently called the Overflow Building, the former warden's house right on Route 2 there. It functions as an administrative building today. That's the one remaining piece of the kind of grander late 19th century architecture there. And then, as mentioned, there's one white row house that was originally a duplex. This was workers' housing. There used to be a series of these along Commonwealth Avenue, as well as another section further east over on Route 2. This is the one remaining example on site. Both sit outside the walls, and the white row house sits across Commonwealth Avenue.
Do you have any preliminary assessment of the condition of those buildings?
They are recorded in kind of states ongoing records. There's nothing particularly recent. We've been inside. I think they're, to do revitalization, reuse, there would certainly be work needed. But they're both, currently used by Department of Corrections for administrative purposes today, so they operate and function.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think we can go to the next slide. a couple of other technical pieces on site. One, which I know is of high interest to the town, is the wastewater treatment plant. It's a 1975 addition here, including a variety of constituent components. Has a capacity of 310,000 gallons per day. And it does service a number of other state properties, including the Northeastern Correctional Farm across the way, as well as the state police barracks and the Mass DOT garage, both on the north side of Route 2 as well. Those will all need to continue to be serviced by that wastewater treatment plants. They're tied in tightly there. Right now, Department of Corrections is in the process of working down capacity here and figuring out what the interim state is, while there's no longer inmates on the main campus flowing into that. You see there's a spec minimum flow that they're working to keep everything functional, but take some pieces offline temporarily while we're in an interim state. We can go to the next slide. One other technical component on site, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, there's a relatively small solar farm on the south side of the site adjacent to the Concord housing property. It's a 2009 edition. It's 60 kilowatts. But we understand that the town has solar goals. We want to talk about this. We're digging into this. Part of the work that we're going to do is determine whether there's opportunity for refurbishment, reuse, either on site or to take some of these elsewhere, but want to flag this to the town and also keep this as a part of our conversation as well.
I was just gonna say, are there any third parties involved in that, or is that all of that was constructed and is owned by the prison?
Yeah, as far as I understand, it's all owned by the state, operating solely for the Department of Corrections.
That was my question.
And then if we keep going, looking elsewhere on the site, just want to make clear for everybody involved, there's a couple other state properties I've noted before. There's the Northeastern Correctional Farm, which is not closing, that will continue to operate. And then two side-by-side properties on the north side of Route 2, the State Police Barracks and the Mass DOT garage. Again, not included in the offering, will not be included in the offering for the closure here. They are serviced by the MCI Concord wastewater treatment plant.
There's no plan to move any of those uses over to this prison site.
No.
Do you have any sense of how many state employees are involved in this compared to, for example, what the peak population used to be?
That's a good question. I don't know that offhand, but I will make it.
Yeah, it's just kind of interesting from an employment perspective to understand what the net change is.
Then if we go to next slide. Oh, sorry. Thanks, Aaron. We see your hand.
Sorry, there's one other building I was curious about it's right on the Rotary. It's, I think, adjacent to the DOT garage. It's, I think, part of the corrections facility, but I wasn't sure if it's associated with the farm. It's kind of on the Barrett's Mill corner with the Rotary.
Yeah, the historic, I'm forgetting.
It's a historic house or something.
Yeah, historic house. That one is, I think functionally itself, officially affiliated with the farm property, not with the MCI Concord property. And I think that one is on the National Register, and we don't anticipate changes to that as a part of this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I believe it's called the John Cummings.
That's right, the Cummings house.
Is the former warden's house on the National Register?
The former warden's house is not on the National Registry. Though the two historic pieces I noted are the two that are within the Mass Historic database of properties, registered as properties of interest.
It was interesting, so it looked like they tried to get it on the National Register, they were in that attachments that Shannon sent, looks like they'd asked for more follow-up information about it. Give it to them. They're eligible to be listed. So they're just waiting if there's more information that they.
Well, even if a building is eligible for the National Register, then it's protected.
And do we know if that building was moved to that location, or was that always its location?
Like the Cummings house or the
Yeah.
Gordon's house?
Yes, sorry.
I don't know the answer to either, but it's.
Yeah, I don't believe that it was moved. I think that that is. I'm thinking back to very old historic maps that I've looked at, and I think that, when, you know, the old turnpike, I think that was, on the corner there.
Okay. I could imagine DOT having some different ideas. But who knows? Thanks.
Go to the next slide. The other piece that I wanted to flag here, knowing that we have, Concord Housing, Development Corporation interests at the table as well. We know that there is the adjacent Junction Village property. This is not a part of what the state is looking to dispose of right now, because the state already, disposed of it, back in 2013. We know that this was included, we understand this was included as part of, your MBTA communities, zoning. And that there was, I believe, a solicitation process that had been inaugurated this fall or winter, that was put on pause here. You know, we see from our perspective, you know, we would hope to coordinate these efforts and, you know, put these, you know, sites in, you know, clear relation to one another, understanding there's designation for affordable housing and open space on that site. We want to make sure that, like, the planning and the thinking for that, all goes hand in hand. We think it's a good opportunity to think of the area more broadly. Want to continue working with people on that.
Has this sort of situation come up in previous disposals where there was something kind of right next to that has some deed restrictions there? You can think of?
Surely there have, I mean, there's, you know, so many campuses that we've closed and, you know, sold off in parcels. But, you know, one where it was the town that was holding the deed and the, you know, and development hadn't begun by the time planning was beginning for the next site, nothing comes to mind immediately.
Okay.
Do some research.
It's always fun to be first.
I think we can advance there. And I'll turn it back over to Abby.
Thanks. So as I said, I think, you know, we've got some ideas that we want to talk through with you all today and into the future about how things can go from here. So I'll start with kind of what's in the latest version of the legislation that we've seen, right? Because that's, you know, let's start with the legal parameters of what we're required to do. And then we'll take it from there. So the latest that we've seen, 4 main points. The first is that Commissioner Bakey would be required to offer to sell the wastewater treatment plant to the town within 30 days of the budget passing. So that's the blink of an eye in our world. You know, we're trying to be prepared to make a serious offer when that comes. The second point that's addressed in this language is substantial stakeholder engagement. So a couple of key components there. We're required to hold 3 public meetings at least, right? This is all 4, the ceiling of requirements. 3 public meetings, the first of which has to be no more than 45 days after the passage of the budget. So we're, you know, expecting an early September meeting based on that math. And then there's an extensive list of groups named in the legislation that the commissioner is supposed to consult with as well, again, as kind of just a floor. I'll say stakeholder engagement is absolutely one of the places where, you know, we would love to follow your lead, all of the town's lead on what the best way is to engage with Concord residents in a way that is meaningful, that makes sense within the context of what else is going on in the town, and that is, you know, actionable for us, right? So that we're asking the right questions of the right people to really come up with a strong product at the end of the day. So the third point in the legislation is that the commissioner is required to file a planning report with the legislature. And that report is supposed to address a summary, is supposed to provide a summary of existing conditions. It's supposed to provide a summary of other plans affecting redevelopment, right? So we talked about Route 2, we talked about Junction Village, we know that there's been some discussion of a West Concord plan. We know that the Warner's Pond Task Force is hard at work, so there's a lot going on right around this site. And so, pulling all of that together into the report, a recap of public input, of course, and then some, you know, the planning report should address some expectation of how the, site might be redeveloped in the future, taking all of those other things into consideration. Yeah.
Is this 30 days? Like once the DOC is fully out?
It's 30 days once the budget has been enacted.
Okay.
So sorry.
Yeah.
The planning report, it's really contingent on us going forward with our zoning rezoning, right?
Not necessarily. I think that the planning report could, like the zoning, is really the way that you can enact what's identified in the plan. Like, if we're all doing our jobs really well and everything goes very smoothly, then I think the zoning would really be the like regulatory framework
Okay.
that then enacts. If that makes sense.
But I think maybe Scott, maybe there's a nuance to your question, that like make sure there's two pieces. The commissioners need to file a planning report with the legislature is not dependent upon whether there's any zoning work done.
Right.
But we expect that the implementation and the ability to put that planning into real life on the ground would be dependent upon it being in line with zoning that the town would put in place. So there's kind of two pieces to that.
So,
We hope it's not a planning report.
right, so the planning report theoretically, as it relates to zoning, would be about, this is what we'd like to see it go.
Yeah.
It has not happened here, you know, we all know the steps to.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and I should have said, I'll get into a little more detail of how we propose that this could play out.
Did the legislature set a deadline for that?
For the
Planning.
For the planning?
planning report, I think it's related to, we can't sell the property without having filed the planning report a certain amount of time before we advertise for sale, right?
That's right.
Okay, so it's a checkbox, but not a date.
Right.
Okay.
There may have been a date in other drafts of the legislation,
Yeah.
but the last we checked, there wasn't.
All right.
Wasn't part of them. And then the fourth point here is, as I said, the commissioner is authorized to lead a competitive process for site disposition. So, you know, we're talking about that path today. We're not talking necessarily about the sales partnership path. I guess one of my goals though for today is to help highlight all of the ways in which, even in this path that we're proposing to move down, that all of the places where the town still does retain control. Most especially on the regulatory, on the permitting side, but in a couple of other places as well.
60 days, but it says, I'm looking at the Senate version, the commissioner shall file a report prepared, for the clerks of the Senate and House of Representatives not less than 60 days prior to the sale, lease, transfer, or other disposition.
Okay, it's 60 days before.
Or not less than 60
Before-
days
before
prior to
Yeah.
the sale, lease, transfer, or other disposition.
Yeah. Okay.
I believe there is the third, or as noted, potentially much more than third, public meeting also needs to happen at least at that 60-day thing. Like it requires that there be engagement at the start, and then there has to have been engagement prior to that timeline.
Now you're making me read more of this.
I might be getting ahead of myself here, but with the disposition, the cost of demo and cleanup. You hope to recoup, I'm sure, from the developer, and you have the historic building itself that might need to be rehab. So some serious costs associated with this.
Yeah.
But that, say it's a big number, that affects kind of the master plan of scalability for the developer to get their money back. So how did chicken or egg? What?
You want to switch seats?
That's very hard. I can't imagine, because
Yeah.
you're playing with numbers.
Yeah.
But you don't have the numbers in front of you yet.
So let's keep going, because you're thinking the way we're thinking, absolutely.
Before we do that though, not to keep this one up too much, but you have the 3 meetings, does one of those meetings theoretically entail the review of the planning report? Is that one of the?
I don't think the legislation gets as prescriptive as that, but as I said, I mean, we're, we're very, we're focused on this first meeting because it's gonna come up on us very quickly, but, the content, the timing, the, methods of all of the engagement is very much something that we want to work through with whoever, I don't know if it's committee, I don't know if it's select board, I don't know if it's town staff, but whoever the right people are in the town, we're, we'll absolutely take our cue,
Okay, great. So,
No, no. That's what we're here for. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'll talk through, a couple of these pieces in more detail. So the question about, all of the work that has to happen starts with a better understanding of what's on site, right? So Paul has been furiously putting out scopes of work to start getting our arms around this. So a couple of key, and I should say, and also our colleague Taylor Morris, who's on the line as well. We're getting a title report, right? We've owned this site for a long time, but let's run down what's there. Same thing on the survey, be clear about what's on site. The historic buildings get better information on them, and kind of where they stand, environmental considerations as well. And then, the wastewater treatment plant notably, but we've been generating steam on the site. There's like a couple of different sets of electrical systems. There's water and wastewater and, I guess gets the treatment plant. Getting our arms better around what is the infrastructure that's in site and what is its reusability and or what is the liability of it for us in terms of removal or abatement. I don't expect that we will have run all of those down to, the dollar and cents, but order of magnitude understanding of what we're going for here.
So presumably there's an actual sewer and infrastructure that crosses Route 2 and gets to these other buildings and.
Presumably.
And is there confidence that all of that stuff is well understood where it's located or?
We'll know more in a few months.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is that fair to say?
there's confidence that we are retaining consultants. to make sure
To make sure that you understand that.
How does that process work of retaining consultants? Like, is it, you have a Rolodex of consultants you worked with on prior projects? Like, how do you evaluate who you're thinking of using?
Ever do you want them?
Sure, I mean, we have many different procurement vehicles, we basically have a several standing contracts, right, that have rosters of firms, that have kind of basically already gone through the contracting process and we're able to work with them on a task order basis. So I think for all of these scopes, you're going out to most of the firms on the list, right, just to see who can, who can put together a good proposal for doing the work. But it depends on what the specific piece of work is.
And that's one of the things that, we as DCAM, as the state's real estate and property management group have a large Rolodex of existing contracts that we can leverage to do things like this. That's exactly what they're here for, and so we're making use of that.
Next slide, please. Oh, sorry.
When you get involved in community engagement work, is that something that's normally handled by in-house engagement managers? For DCAM, or is that the kind of thing that you sometimes also use a communications firm for?
We've done both.
Yeah.
It really depends on what the charge is. And what the resources look like at any given moment. Do you have a thought about how it should go here?
Yeah. Not personally. Probably explain.
Next slide, please.
Sorry, one more on that, and I know we're not at budget yet, but like, as we're thinking a lot, obviously, about the budget, we have a budget and a review, DCAM has a budget as well. This stuff comes from your budget, presumably?
All of
How
the stuff is underway now, we're paying, we've got the funds identified to pay for it, yeah. And this is really our due diligence as the property owner, like we need to know what we own.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so then we get to the fun stuff, which is the planning and engagement. And so, you know, Paul and I are both kind of trained as planners and have get, I don't know, excited about this kind of thing. But so I think we're thinking of a couple of major elements here. And again, really open question as to, you know, what do we do? What do you do? What do we do together? What do we hire someone else to do? But I think the basic outline of the planning report that the commissioner is going to have to deliver looks like this outline here. So first of all, the existing conditions, right, which again, we're scoping the reports to start to figure that out. There's a visioning component, right? And I don't want to say it's a blue sky visioning. It's a whatever do we want to do? Because again, we do have a charge here around housing and decarbonization, but there are a lot of other goals that I imagine the town might have that are compatible with that as well, right? Whether it be about your tax base, whether it be about particular segments of the population that need housing, whether it be about commercial or open space or whatever the other kinds of opportunities may be. So kind of, you know, that visioning piece. Then I think there's a physical planning piece of putting this all together, right? So first of all of the other planning efforts that are going on all around the site, what might be the impact of those? I think we're gonna wanna come up with some principles or some guidelines. Our goal here is not to like draw up the plan and here's parcel A, here's parcel B, here's parcel C, and this one has 60 units, right? Like, we're not doing a master plan for the site. We want to do planning principles, planning goals, set some context for the site, but really, I think try to articulate a set of principles, a set of goals that there might be many ways to solve. So in order to do that, we'll need to look at a whole bunch of different use types and intensity of uses and say, this one, yes, this one, no. What might be the transportation impacts? What might be the water and sewer impacts? What might be the municipal finance, whatever the things are that are important to the town, right? Think through how different uses and different intensities of use might have an impact on those outcomes. And then there's the zoning piece, right? Then there's okay, these are the parameters of what we want to see. How can that be codified? All of this is going to be done with a real estate economist or somebody right next to us the whole time to help us think through the financials of each different scenario, right? So if we're looking at X million dollars of demolition and or, you know, abatement before we even start, and there's historic preservation covenants, right, that are also going to carry a certain amount of cost, but maybe also the opportunity for certain tax credits, right? How does that all get compiled into a feasible plan? Our goal here, I said it in a kind of glib way before, but our goal here is to have something feasible at the end of the day and something that you all want to see built in your town and that developers want to come build in your town. That for us is success. Success is not having the perfect planning process. It's not having the perfect plan. It's not having, you know, something that's beautiful but can never be done. It's really to have something feasible.
Does the governor have a goal in mind for, I mean, there's such a need for housing?
Yeah.
Do they look at this and say, we need so many units, or she's not really caring?
Nobody's given us a goal.
Nobody's gonna give.
Nobody's given us a target of what we want to meet. I mean,
Is that gonna come up? Will there be a goal, you think, coming up from?
I think it's more so gonna be about the economics, right? I think it's, you know, we know that a 50-acre site in Concord is potentially very valuable. We also know that there's a lot of liabilities with this site. And so I think the assumption is you're gonna need certain economies of scale to make a project pencil here.
Yes.
But nobody has told us, you know, if it's less than X number of units,
Okay.
push the town or don't do it or stonewall or something. We've gotten that kind of a.
So I'm gonna go up a level. I'm in terms of what you're describing, this visioning, goal setting piece. We have on our schedule 2 weeks from now to do an in-house, what we'll call an in-house committee, whatever we call it, goal setting.
Okay.
I'm imagining we will do that, and I could also imagine a point at which it would be great to incorporate you guys into that. But I think when I first sort of was talking about, I was thinking we need to understand as a community what our concerns are. And hopefully, as you and Paul both said, and your boss have said, there's great alignment and it will all work well. So to that end, is I'm getting to a question, you're gonna get you're gonna be receiving a bunch of information from your various consultants and stuff, and I'm curious about. Are we going to be at the front end of that, sort of seeing this raw data, or is it your expectation that you're going to be receiving it and making sense out of it and then sharing it?
Are you talking about on the planning end or in terms of the like the specific site?
I think I'm thinking about all these things that are listed on your, I mean, I'm personally also a planner. It's Peter. So the devil for us oftentimes is in the details, and so it could be overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because it is such a complex site, and at the same time, I think there could be something in there that may not either would go through your filters or wouldn't go through the filters that might be useful to us.
I mean, I'll start with the fact that I'm not sure that we're totally settled that there are consultants, that there are DCAMS consultants as opposed to consultants who perhaps are procured jointly, or that the town takes a piece and we take a piece. So no, I mean, certainly, if, you know, if they're your consultants, you see the data, if we're working on it jointly, right, then we're managing them jointly, so I don't, it's not,
Sorry, but did you say that, I mean, to answer your question, you said that that was in the DCAM budget for the ones that you were already out in procurement for?
yeah, so that's
Talking about, right, those.
Yeah, I am, I mean, I'm responding to this, what's
Yeah,
listed,
so-
so.
So I guess when you're saying now we might take part of it, the answer is we don't know yet, who's procuring those?
so all right, so let me draw a distinction on this slide in particular between the existing conditions review, which are the scopes of work which are out and underway, and everything else on here. The everything else on here, we haven't, you know, I think Paul started to like outlines what this might be, but we haven't taken any steps to
Got it.
procuring it, socializing it. The like, what do we own and what are we sitting on? Our kind of property due diligence as the property owners. Yes, we've started working
Is
on
that
that.
part of your question? or
It
we can
is,
access
I mean,
that?
I'm interested, I appreciate you trying to clarify it and narrow it down, you know, I don't even know yet what I were concerned about, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure you've been in this position tons of times too, it's just, there are the things that can crop up that, and that also, you know, unless somebody has a deep understanding of it, something that can look particularly onerous
Yeah.
may not be that onerous, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I'm trying to, my preference would be for us to, like you were suggesting, is
Delve
to
into all
share,
together.
put it in
Yeah,
a big thing, and because there are so many moving parts and people that aren't even at this table right now that it might matter to.
yeah. So I guess I have two answers to that. So the first is, you know, as a public entity, right, where we default to transparency and are required to by law, even if that wasn't part of the predilection. We don't know what these reports are gonna turn out, right? And we don't know what they might say about liabilities that we have. And so for that reason, I don't think I can say today, absolutely 100% everything we know, we will tell you. But it is our intention to be, again, I mean, as transparent as we can be. I just don't know what I don't know yet.
Understood. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
I think, in that same category, I think what we need to be thinking about is, are we hiring our own consultants? Do we want to avoid duplicating efforts? And can you, at a minimum, give us a timeline in which your consultants have been procured? Do they have a deadline, and roughly what is it? So we can manage our own expectations.
Yeah, and that might be, we've talked before about ULI, engaging ULI for a technical assistance panel. They will have experience in terms of these public-private partnerships and how has that rolled out, right? With thin budgets, we don't want to duplicate, so I think that could be another leverage point there.
Who is gonna, once we know how much, if any, money we get for this, which is in the budget legislation, right? So we still don't know what that number is. Who is going to control that money, and how much flexibility do we as a committee have to hire, even if we want to hire?
Yeah, I don't have the answer to that.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, Mary's indicated, but we probably meet the town manager or.
So it'll be a recommendation from our committee to you.
Does that need further appropriation?
No,
No,
no.
because it's outside of the town budget. I think it'd be an interesting
Right.
question to ask, or sort of frame it like, what kinds of things is it difficult for DCAM to pay for that we might then apply some of the funds that come to us from the legislature to accomplish that would augment what they're doing. And I know that's a hard question to answer right now, but I think that's the way I'd like to think about it.
And I think there will be a couple of other considerations. There's consideration of, you know, the timing on which something needs to be procured. So we know that, we understand that there is a certain, you know, fiscal year timeline on the funding that the town will receive, if the town does indeed receive it. So we want to keep that in mind, and we also, to the extent possible within those constraints, want to think about what does it make sense for whom to procure? If there's things about zoning, if there's things about engagement, for instance, as, you know, two potential areas that might make sense for the town to have a leading role on components of that, would that make sense? You know, the ULI piece, you know, is that something where the town having a local voice being the procurement leader there, like that might make sense. So we're thinking about all of these pieces and talking with select board members, talking with staff, talking with you all, trying to understand what those pieces are and how we can best bring the resources that each of us have together to bear on this collectively. So this is specific, like this is laid out not as a DCAM planning process, but as the planning process for this effort.
Is there any way of sharing with us? Sort of a Gantt chart of all the different services and consultants you're going out to, so we kind of know what you're doing versus what we need to do, we can fill in the gaps. Kind of timing wise, like, I'm getting a site surveyor next month, I'm getting this person next month, I'm getting this, and so we have a list of all of them, then we could say. Well, we want to have this person, you gotta fill that, maybe who pays for that, just so we have just a laundry list of what we're dealing with. Is that shareable, or is that,
I'm sure they can understand.
You'd be very helpful. So I think this kind of comes to the bottom line, and I don't expect you to be able to answer this today, but. I guess I think we need to know whether whatever property, if any, we're accepting from the state, if we're taking it as is, whereas with all faults, or which. Would require our own due diligence, I think, as opposed to being able to rely upon and are there representations and warranties associated with what you're providing.
Well, I mean, I think this is one of the key benefits of not going down the sales partnership approach, is that the town wouldn't have to take possession, right? So you don't have to do your due diligence, there wouldn't be an environmental liability that we would have to think about and negotiate on.
I'm gonna just bring it up then. I mean, you said it straight out that you've not been charged with looking at the sales partnership. You've
Yeah.
just been charged with putting it out to bid.
Yeah.
Personally, when looking through these comparative case studies, that worries me a lot because I see someone like National Development or whoever coming in and it's bid out to them and they build something that looks like it's in Sudbury or in Wayland. It's really not us. So that's my primary concern. So the idea, I mean, it may not be anyway, maybe you do communication and they'll say that's what we want, it's what, I doubt it, but, so. When you're talking about this being like, we're all in it together, which I agree with, I hope. But to your point, I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that we might at some point be at odds with each other. And I don't know what that means in terms of consultants and what we get consultants for, but I hope it doesn't become defense versus offense. And I really hope that, but why aren't we talking about the sales partnership? I understand there's been pushback already. The liability doesn't, to me, immediately write off that there's not a sales partnership, because there are ways around liability, obviously, and. If we're dealing directly with developers, we may have more control than if we say to you guys, you know, if you're just going straight out to developers.
So if we can actually
Sure.
go ahead, because I think it really all comes back to the regulatory control, right? And comes back to we want to select a development or, you know, multiple developers, whatever the case may be, that are going to have a successful permitting process with the town, right? And so if there are, I mean, certainly if you guys can say, well, by right, if you do X, Y, Z, you come, you get your permits, you stamp and move along, right? Then then that's the easiest path. Or if there are guidelines, if there's a design review process and the guidelines for that design review are really clear, right? Then we know that it's in our interest as people who want to see something built here to select somebody who clearly conforms with those guidelines as opposed to somebody who like didn't bother to read them, right? So I think, I guess that's the other reason why I presume that we've been asked to go down this path as opposed to the sales partnership path is because a lot of the kinds of control that folks often want to try to enact through the sales partnership process, there may be ways to get at that through through what I'll call the typical process as well. So I've got a couple more slides on that, so let me give me a few more slides to see if I can move. Okay, right, so back to the regulatory updates. So, at some point, you know, as this planning process is progressing, right, I think it would be great if the town said, gee, you know, okay, we get it, we've got the principles, we know it's not gonna be more than such and such a density, we know we want it to look like X, you know, X other part of town, and so we're gonna take those design guidelines there and brush them off and apply them here, right, whatever we hope that at some point in our planning process, a regulatory framework will start to emerge. I think our commissioner is really hoping that it can be a form-based code, right? So one that is really about how does it blend in with the surroundings? What is the intensity of use? What is the impact on the surrounding areas? And less about, you know, you have like the house goes here with the minimum 10-foot setback, right? It's less prescriptive, more outcomes based, but that would be for the town to figure out. But again, that's really how we would hope that the planning schemes, principles, concepts that will generate together get enacted is through the zoning. Certainly text and map updates, but we don't, you know, we haven't really looked at what other regulatory frameworks might apply here as overlays or what have you. Next, please. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about this is like now looking many years down the road, but I think it's helpful in a planning process to understand like, well, what is the ultimate property transfer gonna look like? So, I'll talk a little bit about just kind of how DCAM typically approaches these kinds of things with, again, the understanding that none of this has been set in stone for us in this particular instance. So typically in our process, as I've been saying, we will work with the local stakeholders to understand what are the likely permitting pathways, right? We know that the state property owned by the state, used for state uses is not subject to local zoning. Once we sell it to somebody else for private use, typically, usually, we presume it's subject to local zoning, right? So they're gonna have to go get permits from you. What does that look like? We then undertake a competitive selection process. So, right, this is how do we ensure that we get the best value for the Commonwealth? We make people compete and we tell them what are the areas that we are going to be evaluating you on. Those may be financial and non-financial. So, you know, our goal here is not to like maximize revenue. We would like for the value of the site to cover all of the costs of the site. That would be grand. And we think that can actually happen here, which is not the case with a lot of our properties. But beyond that, you know, in it's a $50 billion operating budget, you know, we're not trying to balance the state's operating budget through the sale here. And so feasibility is always one of the key criteria that we look at when we go through a selection process. And then again, typically, we don't close on the sale for, you know, a big project like this. We don't sign the deed over until they have the permits in hand, right? So it's not good enough for a developer to come in and say, oh, here's the great thing that I'm gonna build you, and we'll say, okay, great, sure, have at it. We'll say, okay, great, go get it permitted, and then come back to us when you've got your permitting and financing in place, and then you're ready to start construction, and then we'll sign the deed. So it's different, right, than how we work with towns, for example, right, where often we will, as in the case of Junction Village, right, we'll sell it to you with a deed restriction in place, trust that you're gonna, you know, that our interests are aligned here, so you're gonna do what you've said you'll do. That's not how we operate with private commercial sales. Question?
Can you talk about the RFP process for the developer and how you interact and engage with our Concord planning and how involved they are in incorporating nuances that are really important for the fabric of our town?
So, what we would typically like to do is to have a robust planning process that can then be used to inform our RFP, right? So really the planning process that we go through is the vehicle through which that all gets translated into the RFP, right? So we'll, whatever the reports are, whatever the minutes from the public meetings are, all of that kind of stuff gets incorporated into the RFP, and then how well your proposal aligns with that is absolutely one of our key evaluation criteria.
Do we have a say, does the town have a seat at the table with selecting the developer?
So not typically, so the commissioner, single individual of the commissioner is the one who's charged with actually making the selection. We will typically put together a staff evaluation committee that reviews the proposal to check for their alignment. Again, with the understanding that once we select somebody, that's when they then come to the town and go
How do
through
they
the
know?
permitting process.
I'm just curious, if there's no voice from Concord on that selection, how do they get our input and our feeling towards developer's presentation?
So, because of the 2 years of work that we'll have done up front together. Again, that's how, this is,
Okay.
I'm laying out a
No.
typical process that, not to say it can't be done under
Okay,
this.
thank you.
Looks like there's a question from someone on the.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry if this takes us a half a step backwards, but is it by definition that the town of Concord would assume control or own the property, or is there are there any alternate paths where the parcel actually does not get conveyed to Concord?
So everything that I've been discussing assumes that Concord does not take possession of the site at any time. So that the sales partnership option is the option where we sell it to the town, and then the town in turn does its own competitive selection process for a developer. What I've been describing is the process by which DCAM would work with the town to define guidelines, requirements. The town would work to put in place zoning, and then DCAM would sell it to somebody who then will go through the town's permitting process.
Sorry, I think I misspoke there. Not owned by the town, but rather it would, like, the site would be part of the town, as opposed to how today it is, state property.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So would it be, so the parcel would be part of the town of Concord? It would be, obviously it would be developed by somebody. It would be like the individual properties would be owned by private parties. But the actual land would be part of the town of Concord, whereas I understand it today is that it is state-owned land.
It's state-owned land, but it's still within the town of Concord. So we're, I'll say we're a landowner like any other, except we're not like any other because we don't pay taxes for starters and it's subject to zoning. But we're a landowner, so this is not like
Okay.
part of the town. It's still part of the town,
Got it. Thank you.
and it will remain obviously part of the town after it's redeveloped. Yeah.
Just one example that might not fit into the box that you described is like, let's pretend the consensus is we want to build a full-size soccer field that the town would own.
Mhm.
I think maybe that doesn't quite mesh with what you just described, so just something to consider as you go down the road.
Yeah, right. So that's a good point, right? The planning process may lead us
But if it's
to.
town owned, it would need environmental scrutiny.
Right, lead us to an idea where the site gets subdivided, right? And we sell a portion to you for certain uses and then we RFP.
Yeah, I mean, more
another
immediate
portion,
is the wastewater treatment, so the town will end up purchasing that.
Yeah, I imagine there's some discussion about what the boundaries of that are, because I'm sure they're not well delineated at the moment. Anyway.
They're not at the
we'll have
moment,
to
no.
decide. Yeah,
So just to kind of reiterate or, you know, articulate very specifically what DCAM's priorities are when we're going through one of these disposition processes. So the first is to leverage the site value, the value of the site to deliver on housing and climate change priorities. Again, not a moneymaker, but not a money loser, we hope either. And housing, say again, housing. Number two, a clear pathway to permitting. Again, you know, we have lots of examples in our portfolio of projects of sites that have sat for 20 years, 30 years. We don't want that to be the case here. We really want to be able to select a developer to build a project here that you all feel good about and that, you know, that can get permitted expeditiously, let's say. And, you know, this only happens if we identify common ground between what the town's goals are for the site and what the state's goals are for the site. I can't figure out how it would work any other way. I think that's it for my slides. Is there, Shannon, would you mind seeing if there's one more here? Oh, no, wait,
There
There-
looks like 4 more.
yes, right, like how does all this stack together? No, no,
So wait,
I
okay,
don't
okay.
cover, please. So just in terms of sequencing again, right, we've got some planning work to do, some stakeholder engagement, some visioning. And again, still an open question about what do we take the lead on, what do you take the lead on, who's supporting, how's that all working? So that's, you know, a combined DCAM town activity. Then there's the zoning and regulatory updates, which would be a town activity. Again, we hope that can at a certain point start to move in a parallel track to the planning process. And then we would lead the competitive disposition process. And then, you know, the selected developer would come to you all for local permitting. But in any case, you know, I think it's probably 2 years for planning and regulatory updates. It could be easily a year for us to put together an RFP and select a developer before they're ready to then do permitting. And then hopefully, through your expedited permitting, it's a relatively smooth and easy permitting process. But in any case, we're still, you know, several years from best case scenario, several years from shovels in the ground here.
In that interim 2-year state, I mean, is it really anticipated that the site will just sit vacant as is? Do you think there'll be an initiative from the state to to create sort of affordable housing in the prison as it stands today?
You mean emergency shelter?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I think when I was asked this question in a meeting with staff a couple of weeks ago, my answer was like, when I asked a few months ago, I was told we wouldn't want to put people in a prison for emergency housing, but that's has changed since. So I honestly don't know. I mean, I can tell you that part of the reason why this site was identified for closure is because the capital investment that's needed to continue to house people there is enormous. And so I think that that's still the case for an interim use as well. You know, it's not turnkey property.
Right.
Let's put it that way. But I honestly don't know anything more than that.
Thank you.
When you embark on your title search and survey, what will happen if you find any deed restrictions, and do you intend to put any deed restrictions on the parcel?
My lawyers are telling me not to answer. I don't know, but I honestly don't know. Let me put it this way, the records that we have in our possession right now don't show any restrictions. Would we intend to put any restrictions in place? I mean, I think that that's gonna depend a lot on what the planning process shows. I would hope not, right? Because again, I would hope that there's a way to, through local regulatory processes, to enact any of the controls that we would want to see here. But you know, Paul mentioned earlier, we've got a wastewater treatment plant. It currently serves properties that are going to continue to be in operation. So we may need some assurances around that. We haven't gotten there to figure out what that looks like.
Patrick, do you have your hand raised?
Yeah, thank you. Just maybe just a tactical ask. I don't know if DCAM could help with this or Megan, but just this is a really helpful few pages that we've gone through, being able to overlay some of the dates that we've discussed, like on page 17, onto something like this, would just continue to help, I think, bring clarity and transparency to the timeline, both long-term and kind of through the rest of the year.
And I can imagine that working in both directions too. That, once we start to get revved up, we can provide that.
Absolutely.
So we have a combined timeline.
Yeah, this slide remains illustrative and I wouldn't.
Don't set your clock back.
I've already started.
I wouldn't try to target that bar that relates to, I wouldn't say, if that relates to Q1 of 2027, I wouldn't say that that's
Fair.
what's intended here. This is illustrative of the relative high level components here. And yes, there will be many more dates associated with it. We're gonna continue working with town staff on those dates and thinking about, particularly the engagement piece. Where do we put that in the immediate term, and then where does that go to subsequent pieces? There's gonna be elements that we know the town will drive, for instance, on when things might need to go to town meeting to back out of. So like there's a world of fun Gantt chart components that can be overlaid on top of this, and will continue to be as we go.
Excellent. Sorry.
Oh, and just to go back to a question that I know that we've talked about a little bit, in general, this process is not one that's open to some kind of preemptive offer to purchase the property from a developer ahead of this planning process taking place from DCAM's perspective.
Thank you, Mark. As of today, the commissioner has no authority to sell the property. He is not authorized to sell the property. So DCAM doesn't have standing authority to do any kind of transaction on state property, no, only the legislature. So presuming that this bill, but we think that with the budget, right, that authorization will come. That authorization is still, there's still a box around what he is and isn't allowed to do. So he can either do a sales partnership or competitive selection process. So there is no, somebody comes and makes you an offer you can't refuse, and you go ahead and sign on the dotted line with them. That's not, the commissioner's not authorized to do that.
Okay.
That's good.
Thank you.
Scott?
These things take years, and I was curious, who's responsible for protecting and taking care of the facility, making sure that people aren't trespassing, getting hurt, things like that?
So the property is still under the care and control of the Department of Corrections. There is a process in our bureaucracy whereby that care and control may be transferred to DCAM, and DCAM has a surplus property division that does all of that kind of securing and
The
monitoring.
24/7 monitoring, is it someone on site like watching?
It depends on the site, and so we haven't, I don't,
I just imagine it's gonna be a big allure for kids to get into.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know if anyone in our property operations division has started putting together a plan, because DOC is still gonna have care and control for a while.
Okay, but somebody should be thinking about.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so.
Sorry.
We talked about real property, but what about archival material? Will that go to the state archives, Mass Historical Commission? Department of Corrections, does Concord have any interest rights? I would imagine has certain interests in any historic materials, if there are any that exist on the property now.
That's a good question. Have you talked about that at all, previously?
I don't know the answer to that. My understanding is that the records management, the process of going through all of the things that do exist on site sits with Department of Corrections. They're the point for that.
Yeah.
And that's why they will certainly continue to have control for at least the next several months. Our understanding is that like a turn down process of taking all of that reporting and making sure that everything is handled in a months to year type of process.
And then does have anything in your budget to look at?
No, none of the materials. Right, and then there's gonna be, there are records retention requirements, right, that DOC will have to go through, but then for the things that they're not required to retain. That's a good question. We'll talk to them about that. Thank you.
Can I take sort of a step back and forgive me, this whole process of this public partnership is gonna be, but so like, it seems like it's a foregone conclusion that you're going through the solicitation process on your own. Like, if the town wants to revisit a sales partnership process, what's the process to do that?
So that decision is with the commissioner. So I mean, we meet with him frequently about this project. He's very interested. He was here last time. Yeah, I don't know.
I just wanted to revisit, in my opinion, we haven't even
We
visited.
haven't even visited,
We
yeah.
never visited. And I think we never had the opportunity as a committee to even know
Discuss
the
it.
pros and cons of it. I mean, there's
Right.
some communities like Medfield who were all in favor of a sales partnership because they wanted control, they didn't want a certain type of developer coming in. So I don't think as we as a committee knew the nuances of one versus the other, just so we could have a say in all of the other. And it sounds like, I thought sales partnership was something that was offered towns and not something that someone just made the decision before we started. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think we're examining it.
Let's get it
I
back.
mean, I think I'd like to.
Yeah,
I think we'll be doing that at an upcoming meeting.
Okay.
Um, Keith,
I'll keep Bergman, Concord's rep to the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, so one of the stakeholders and a retired town manager. But although not a Concord. Looking at the timetable for wastewater, you're gonna offer it within 30 days of this, of the legislation being signed. How long does the town have to respond and consummate that deal? Does that would seem to require a town meeting vote? To have, and that if I were voting a town meeting on that, I probably, as a voter, I probably want to know what's going to go there. To even allow that much, like, unless there's something else going on behind the scenes about why that happens all by itself and so soon.
I would defer to others on the why for the timeline. I believe the legislation does also include a timeline for the town to consider that. I think it's 180 days on the consideration, but
Full town meeting.
we'll look back at that again.
So, Dan, can you clarify, at town meeting, you would want to know what goes there?
I'm just saying, as a voter, if in order for the town to, the voters to authorize the town to acquire the wastewater facility, and all that comes with it, and the first question I have is, what's the net amount of capacity that's available once you take out the existing state uses? And does that get you down to,
But no, to your point,
Yeah.
you'd want to know what goes there, so.
I would wanna know what the use is, I would wanna know, what is the town's plan for the property, that goes with this, wastewater treatment plant, which is to serve that property. Might be nice to know.
Okay, but you're not talking about the whole 50 acre, because I can tell you, next
No,
week,
no, I know.
you won't know what
No, I
the
know.
zoning's gonna be.
No, I know that we won't know that, so I just, and I think we're both pointing out the disconnect between the information that would be required to get a town meeting vote to approve zoning, which is a couple of years from now, versus
Yeah.
this initial step along the way, to get town meeting approval to authorize acquisition of wastewater plant, which can only be used for that property. Strategically, I probably want the town to own it, because then that gets us a seat at the table and what the use of the property are.
Yeah, I do want to sit on that for a bit right now. Your point is noted, both points. They're good, they're valid points for consideration, but I'm also mindful of the time and I want to make sure that you have finished, you have, at least by my time.
Please, I think we have a, what are your questions kind of slide.
We've exhausted ourselves. Well, sorry,
No, that's it, and then it's our contact information on the last one, so. we're
Okay,
good.
awesome.
You might not show them.
I want to thank you both. I'm sorry.
Can I just point out another disconnect with, you have this legislation and you have these funds that the town is going to get that we're supposed to use by June 30th of next year. Unless there's, and if that's your, you're gonna hire somebody to help with the public engagement, facilitating, I can tell you, perfect site for form-based code, that will not be developed in-house. That is, that there's people that have expertise in doing that. So unless there's a way to execute a full range contract that basically can appropriate all those funds, they won't be expended by June of next year.
Okay, thank you.
Just for the people who might watch this later, that was Elizabeth Hughes.
Yeah, sorry.
Planner. Okay.
And Peter.
Yeah, and my question sort of goes to the point Elizabeth raised. So in many municipalities and state agencies, if you sign a contract committing the funds by June 30th, you don't have to expend them by June 30th, so it could go on for, beyond that time frame. I'm wondering what the town of Concord's sort of process is. If we enter into an agreement with an outside consultant to do a form-based code and help us with some of this planning process, and here we go, June 30th.
Yeah, that was one of the questions that we actually had about what the legislation leads to, and so far, I think the answer has been that we may in fact actually have to expend the budget 30th. According to the way the legislation is written, which doesn't necessarily mean we couldn't do something else, but that's just our understanding at this point in time.
Not for here, I mean, that may just be, entering into a contract for
Yeah.
the amount, but I think it would be helpful to get, from DCAM, but other consultants that have similar type of projects or partnerships, done, the visioning, done zoning, done form-based code. The consultants that DCAM have is gonna be off the state contract list.
Correct.
Where you don't have to, go out for formal request for proposals and. So we would be able to provide a list of consultants in all of those different categories that have done. The communities.
Okay, well, I think we're winding down, in terms of time. I want to thank you both, for coming. That was great. I really appreciate the information and the presentation. It was really helpful.
Thank you for having us.
I hope many more times.
So did everybody on the committee have a chance to respond to Shannon already about their availability for the site visit on the 19th?
I know.
Okay, you have everybody, great. This one, and then we have a couple.
Yeah, we have, so coming up for the next meeting, we have the interim zoning consideration. That's gonna be discussion with our attorneys. Right, and that's on Monday here on the 22nd. If time allows, and I hope it will, we want to try to at least start the goal setting process. A discussion about that, if nothing else, of how we're going to tackle it, setting the time for that. And then in the future, we have Mass DOT coming to a meeting. And then by all means, we are talking about the community engagement piece of it.
Realized I skipped over this one.
Did I skip over 4? Oh, thank you. So, oh my God, that's a big deal. So I'm sorry, Megan.
No, hardly. I think my only update I wanted to talk about that wasn't really, thanks. I was gonna talk about meetings with DCAM, which, you heard the latest here. I wanted to share that, we are at the early stages of working on our wastewater treatment work with Weston and Sampson, and I talked to the works director
And as soon as he has an update, we will provide it here, and I'll ask the chairs to put an item on a future agenda to bring him in so that you can ask questions and fully understand where we are with that. I also wanted to talk, I know we're ending here, but I wanted to mention the work to start some public meetings with DCAM. Needs to start 45 days after the legislation passes, and there's been some discussion, at least at the staff level, about how to educate the community, and I'd like to hear your thoughts, or just start thinking about, if we're gonna start this formal public input process, is there something we can do together, staff and this advisory board, to schedule some type of 101 baseline information session so that the community is up to speed and ready to provide input? So I was thinking that might be something for September. Maybe you could give that a think through, and I'm happy to, work to coordinate it. There was a recent Warner's Pond forum that had task force members sitting at different tables, so there might be some ways we can even bring in some of these elements from the DCAM presentation about setting the stage of the site that exists right now. What do we know? And what does the future look like for planning? So that's on my mind as we're trying to build up our webpage and encourage people to tune into these meetings. It might be time to kind of go out in the fall and set the stage for future input.
I think that's great, and I think you're right on in terms of the timing, so I welcome that conversation. Thank you, Megan. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
That's okay.
Dan, just one more for future meetings,
Yes.
is getting ULI here. They were available to come on the 22nd, but it sounds like we're booked on that. Our agenda might be booked
Okay,
if we're doing zoning.
is August 5th a possibility? Can we check with them?
I can check with August 5th. I may not be here on August 5th. I'll be in California, but
I think it'd be good for you to be here
yeah, so maybe if it's not August 5th, it could be the one.
the 19th.
Okay, I'll check.
All right, thank you. All right, so,
Let's get a question.
sorry,
I just had a question. I think once we get people together, they're gonna want to make this side. And I was gonna ask, I sent to you that Andover drone view, and I wondered if we could put something on our website that is a similar video of the site, so that if we can't get people in there for those sorts of meetings, then they can actually see it, and we can send them that site they did for the MBTA communities. And maybe that can be out of your budget.
There's a possibility that MMN may be able to do that.
Oh.
That's a local video service here. I don't know when that should be scheduled, certainly any kind of remote stuff, can be scheduled whenever it's appropriate to do it. I might be able to offer you something regarding site that it's not, a whole community. But separately, what may be an advantage, your department, as well as the town in terms of communication.
Peter,
Yeah.
sorry.
You a flower for others, but maybe some-
And my question was, I'm not available on the 19th. Is there another date when we might be able to go, and that sort of leads into some of the conversations we just started having about, public tour, or visit, flyover, that type of thing.
And Lee just brought up, and I agree with it, it'd be nice to carve out some time in our next meeting while it's fresh to just sort of talk about what we just heard and so. Anybody else, dare I ask? Okay, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you guys for supporting me.